So we were talking about getting the ego out of the way. One of the tools, or one of the goals of the magician is to, you know, because we were talking about that whole issue with, we're talking about that whole issue of the conscious and unconscious mind, and we're mostly the result of our programming. And then one of the goals of the magician is to get the ego out of the way so that you can do that which serves you, as opposed to that which you think should serve whatever is not you. We were talking about this, right? The society, the shadow self. Okay, so and then so ultimately, what does this really come down to? Like, why do we even study this stuff? What's the point? The point is not so much to do ritual, not so much to be psychic, not so much to do the work, which we do the work. But the idea is that it is a mindset. We were talking about mentalism, right? The Seven Hermetic Principles, and that everything begins in the mind. It's all about your attitude, right? You take on a magical persona, and then you go forth and you do magic. It sounds really simple, but that's just kind of what it is. The idea is that, like, there is a different, like, one of the biggest polarities that we see as far as, like, you know, how we see ourselves in the world is whether we are living in a state of scarcity or whether we're living in a state of abundance. We're in both at the same time. It's a matter of perspective, right? Like Taoists would say that, you know, you have enough already. A wise man is a man who knows that he has enough. So you're already in abundance, and everything else is a gift, right? Because you're still here. You could be dead, but you're not. You're still here. So, like, and then the idea is that okay, so, now let me articulate this a different way. Ultimately, the other character character trait, I guess, that would define a successful magician, you might say, is the idea of faith, right? In that almost your ritual is a formality, because it's already going to work. You know it's going to work, because that magic works, right? Or whatever you tell yourself, right? I mean, but the point is, the more successes you have, the easier it is to have faith. And that's what's great about magical successes, because then you can build on that. And you're like, I know it works, because it worked that time, so it'll work this time too. Same way when we bend spoons as a group, right? It becomes easier when we work together, because we're sharing that astral space. There's that too. But okay, so that was kind of my recap of the last class. I know some of the stuff got cut too.
Can I ask you a question, Robert?
Yep, sure.
So if you know that it works, what about destiny and all that? Like,
what do you mean?
For example, if a person's to die, say, at a certain point in time, and it's already...
Well, okay, we can talk about multiple worlds and stuff later in this class, because I was kind of planning on doing that anyway.
Okay.
The idea, the short answer is, we want to be very careful about how we word what we do, because the unconscious mind does not care about good and evil. The unconscious mind will give you what you focus on.
Well, unconscious mind, is that the same as subconscious mind?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately we can probably redefine those and divide them up between unconscious, subconscious, higher self. But in our purposes, we're gonna put them all in one group, and we're gonna say yes, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Functionally, it's the same thing for our purposes. Okay, but so getting to the class, getting to this stuff. So we went over the three supernal Sephiroth, and we touched on, we didn't really get to vibration, but we touched on the first two of the 7 or 8 really Hermetic Principles. Mentalism being that everything begins in the mind, everything ultimately ends in the mind too, and that polarity is that we are constantly caught between the poles of severity and mercy. And unless we are the one, we are bound between those dynamics. And that ultimately what we try to do, or some of us try to do anyway, is to resolve those polarities, resolve those paradoxes, to rise above them, to not be yanked around by them left and right, and to make our own decisions, right? To do our true will. So when we get, so now below the abyss, we are getting to, well actually, you know, before, sorry. All right, so let's talk about vibration, because I don't think we actually talked about that too much. The idea of vibration being the third Hermetic principle is vibration is sort of your emotional states, right? That could be what we call force, right? When we're talking about form and force, form being the mind, the intellect that creates the image, and force being the emotion that gives it life. In the thought form sense, vibration is sort of, well, everything is vibration, right? We know that. Everything. Matter is vibration, it's just very slow. Thoughts are vibration, they're just different. You know, it's all here. This is all the music of the spheres, right? I don't know. So we can also kind of call some of the karmic cause and effect under vibration too, although there is actual cause and effect, which we'll get to later. But the point with this and the point with mentalism was, again, the idea of where attention goes, energy flows, right? So what you focus on, regardless of whether it's in your best interest or not, is more or less what your unconscious mind pays attention to and then delivers in the form of manifestation. We were also, okay, we should touch on this again too. We were also talking about, which I think got cut out, we were talking about mana, right? We were talking about that astral light that could also be called mana. I used Peter J. Carroll, his work, he's a chaos magician. I don't actually consider myself a chaos magician, but it is where I started. And I did find some of his work very enlightening, and I still like his concept of mana. I still use, and I think you'll like. I think we actually touched on it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we were trying to define mana, and we were talking about it from 3 different perspectives, right? As a way to wrap our head around. We were looking at it in a material way, a magical way, and a transcendental way. Right? So mana, according to Peter J. Carroll, the material definition would be that mana is the information that shapes reality, of which physical reality is but one aspect. The magical concept is that mana is the power that gives rise to phenomenon, because the future is largely undetermined. That'll become more important later. And then the third, the transcendental concept, is that mana is any act of consciousness. It's all the same, but it's like 3 different ways to look at it, right? So, when we were talking about vibration, and we were talking about that thought form, another way to think about it, a way I like to think about it, when we're thinking about trying to make something manifest, something happen. Essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to envision a future where that wish has come true, right? And the more time, the clearer we can make our visualization, the stronger that we can make our emotional force that we can feed that, the longer we can hold that in our mind when we're charging whatever it is that we're charging. But more to the point, if quantum physics shows us or tells us that everything that can happen does happen somewhere, somehow, some way. So what we're doing with our consciousness is we're just collapsing the wave function. We're opening Schrodinger's box, right? We're opening the door to the future, whatever that is. And that can only be what's possible, but what's possible is incredible, right?